The biggest childcare provider in the country has said it is about time that we seriously looked at the system that we have. The day before, the Sex Discrimination Commissioner, a person on the government payroll, said it's time for us to go back to square one when it comes to childcare. And private childcare operators believe that the government is putting too much pressure on them, and it means it's not just cutting into their profits, but it is now meaning some of them are starting to run at a loss. Now, childcare is one of those issues that I believe, like small business, if you can get it right, you could flip millions of people's votes in one day. As the Prime Minister prepares to head towards Western Sydney, and we'll probably go on the road as well, what I find fascinating about this is that there are going to be all sorts of announcements inevitably about roads or rail or lots of things which are promises that will never come to fruition. But if the Prime Minister really wants to make a huge impact in suburban Sydney and a message that will make it to every suburban part of our capital cities, do something about childcare. Now, all of us understand that childcare is not babysitting. Childcare is something where professionals are involved in early childhood learning. As we've spoken about before, Australia's education system, compared to the rest of the world, is starting to fall behind. And we want kids to go in with the best possible start into kindergarten, rather than just as it might have been in the 80s or a little bit earlier than that, kids being experts at being able to play in a sandpit and fall asleep and drink chocolate milk, which pretty much was what most old school ideas of preschool was. But childcare and early childhood education is damn important. So we need to find a new balance. We need to go back and we need to work out how this system works. We need to make sure that the people who are working in it are trained properly, are paid properly. But we also need to make sure that there is a greater parity between the for-profit and not-for-profit childcare sector. You see, this is really screwing parents over, because you have one group with one particular purpose, another with another, but the standards are the same for both. Now, I'm not saying that if something should be run for profit, it should be for higher standards. But, of course, the one that isn't run for profit can afford to pass on fewer costs to the customer. And also, when we start talking about childcare too, how many people do we need to come who are inside the system who say we need to make sure that it is easier for centres to stay open longer? Because let's be honest, what parent goes to work from 9 till 3? Particularly in the modern city, where you have to get up at 7 o'clock, get on the road by 7:30, and good luck being home by 6. We need to talk about longer opening hours, we need to talk about more positions, and we need to be realistic about who is going to help pay for the people who aren't babysitting but are actually taking care of your kids. It's wrong that in a country like ours, people have to go to work for 3 and a bit days a week to pay for the childcare that is needed for families to be able to have enough money left over at the end of the week to pay their bills. This is a problem, this is a crisis, and whoever gets it right will get millions of votes, regardless of who the Prime Minister is. But we have now seen two ends of the spectrum that are now starting to talk about childcare and the incredible need to get on top of this. Now, I know this is one of those subjects that would be hardly considered the sexiest of topic, and unless your family is involved in it, you probably couldn't give two stuffs about it. But I think in the same way that whoever can come up with the best package for small business, they'll flip millions of votes. Whoever can come up with a genuine, proper solution for the cost of childcare while maintaining its quality also, I think, has a huge run at some votes as well. Not a promise, but an actual solution. Now, Kelly, we've had the largest provider of childcare say there's a problem. We've had the Sex Discrimination Commissioner say that there's a problem. And we've had the private owners of childcare say that there's a problem. So, all right, there clearly is one. But is the problem people not wanting to pay for something but also demanding better quality, or the private company saying, well, bugger this, we want to make more money? I mean, what do you see?
Look, it's just a stoush over money. It's a very simple one today, where they're saying the government should pay what it's forcing us to do, which is costs are increasing in childcare centres because they're reducing the number of children who can be... So at the moment, let's say if you've got a child under 2 in daycare, there's 1 teacher per 5 babies. That's the sort of requirement. There'll be 1 to 4. So that's 20% you've got to find somewhere, and so the parents pay for it. To give you an example, I'm in an area that has very little childcare. I'm paying $140 a day out of my post-tax pay packet, which is not much these days, for childcare. Now, you do get a proportion of that back from the government already, and that's a significant saving. But you think about those figures, and it is very difficult for people to go to work in those circumstances.
Right.
If they're paying for more than one child a day, government's encouraging families. Professional women are not going back to work because they have to pay these high fees. And some of the big companies recognise this sort of drain. You know, I think it's a really important one to sort out. It is not charity, it's an investment in the future of this country.
Exactly.
And, you know...
Well, and also, but do you agree with me, Kate, that if you can nail this, you are going to... This is one of those things that if you get it right, whichever political side it is, not the promise but the actual implementation,
yes,
people will go, yeah, I'll vote for that.
But also the complication of all this too is that the childcare workers are among the poorest paid. You know, some of them are getting, you know, $18 an hour. Yet the cost for people to send their children to childcare is absolutely prohibitive. And you do wonder whether sometime down the track it wouldn't be more beneficial for the government to, rather than giving rebates, to directly fund childcare a little bit more like primary schools.
Yeah.
Or they should subsidise nannies for a start. And everyone looks at that and goes, that's such an elitist thing for people to say. But if you do the figures on what it costs me for childcare, and when I've got 3 children, to look after at various points, it's actually cost effective to have a nanny, and this is a sort of an industry that is untaxed for the government too. So, you know, let's just bring it all above board. Let's be sensible about solutions for working families that they're supposed to care about. And that's how you build an economy, getting people into the workforce and letting people be productive.
Well, and that's the thing, isn't it, too, Joe? We're not talking about people, and the easy criticism that people will probably start yelling at Twitter is, well, if it's too expensive, stay home with your kids. Well, sometimes people don't have that option because the boss says you've got to come back, or you either, you know, you've got to return to get back to the momentum of going back to work.
Yeah. Yeah, like the childcare thing, and I used to do it. I don't have kids, obviously, but I did cover this round for the telly, and I've got to say it is the most vexed issue that you can get in any society. So I'll give you an example. Just say, for example, people, you know, living in Sydney or one of the other big cities in Australia, which has ridiculously high real estate prices and cost of living expenses. Firstly, you got the regulatory thing. So childcare centres have to be approved by councils. Then they are regulated by state community service departments, and then they are funded indirectly or directly through subsidies and tax cuts to the people who go there by the federal government. But everyone sort of sheets everything home to the federal government. Now, they need more childcare centres to satisfy huge amounts of demand, but of course councils won't approve them in local areas because the noise prompts complaints by residents who then vote for the councillors who say they're going to oppose that thing. You know, it's kind of like building a mosque, but for, you know, little rich white kids. So you got that problem.
And they're not little rich white kids.
No, they're not, Kelly. That's right. And we'll get you your nanny. I'm getting to that. and then you have issues like the Department of Community Services stuff and the regulation of childcare centres and also preschools, which are run by the state and are often used, which are sort of late age childcare centres, and you've got things like all the costs that go into that, and there are things also again like the ratio. So you want your child to have the best possible care. You don't want to have one, you know, kid just out of TAFE looking after 10 toddlers who are all crawling off in different directions, and we've seen them go missing. Yeah. So that raises the cost, and again, so it becomes more and more expensive. And then you say, well, why don't you just stay at home? Well, it is almost impossible for any single income family to survive in a city like Sydney.
Correct.
So you have to go back to work, but of course you're going back to work and you might be getting, you know, let's call it your $500 if you're working part-time a week, or your $1,000 if you're working part-time. And again, as Kelly says, you know, your $400 of that, $800 of that might be soaked up by childcare, which just hits a barrier at every single turn. Because, of course, you're not going to say, like, look at what happened with ABC childcare, right?
Yeah,
that was cheap, that was affordable. It ended up being built on a mountain of paper. There ended up being heaps of safety issues, and it was a massive outrage. So the industry was cleaned up. Now it's expensive, blah, blah, blah. So if anyone can solve it, good luck.
I mean, look, and it's that thing, we've talked about priorities before, and I think, again, we keep talking about the priority for me, which is about, look, I'm all up for faster, better internet, whether it comes to an NBN, but if you've got $43 billion, what do you spend it on? A blue cable that's going to go everywhere, or do you take 10 of it and put it into problems like this? See? Simple solutions.